Hey everyone, and welcome back to the world of Noodle. I'm Richard Osborne, and you might have watched my videos up until the end of last year when I switched from Noodle over to doing AI coding, vibe coding with Claude Code. So I've been deep into Claude Code for the last 7, 8 months, and I thought that the Noodle project was finished because I didn't see a world where there was any point in visually creating an app using a node graph when it would take about a tenth of the time and zero learning as well for a new builder or somebody who's learning about software to build their software using Claude Code. So it felt like the age of no code or low code was coming to an end. And I think that's still true today, but having had a look at Noodle recently and looking at all the projects that we had to try to bring it up to date with AI coding, I realized that there was scope for certain kinds of applications being developed in a way that you have the framework of Noodle, in a way that an LLM, an AI can read the framework and understand the framework and create an app using the JSON language that Noodle uses rather than using pure code to be able to create something that's already on an existing framework. So it's kind of like if you gave WordPress and Claude Code a connector so that Claude Code could, for example, create custom modules or plugins for WordPress and do a landing page for you without you having to design it in like the WordPress visual designer. So I feel like there's scope for that, somebody who wants to take ownership of what's built by Claude Code by learning the framework of Noodle, which is definitely something you can learn, and being able to therefore continue the project even if their connection to the AI is cut off, because otherwise you're reliant on an AI to do any debugging, any maintenance, any updates to the app, any new features. Whereas with this, you could even just have the base developed with Claude Code or something similar, and then carry on developing things by yourself, making tweaks by yourself, taking care of the hosting by yourself, fixing any bugs by yourself, and maintaining the app by yourself without having to ask AI, but you can if you want to. So it gives you that choice to be able to do things visually if you want. So Noodle has gone through a lot of changes, and we have rebirthed it as NodeGX, or Node Graph Expression, which was Deshant's idea for a name. And so first things first, redone the dashboard, the launcher, with folders, which is nice. So you can have a folder and organize projects into folders. You can search projects, which is nice as well. We'll have templates in the future and better GitHub integration. So you'll be able to see, I think you can already see, yeah, you can see all your GitHub projects. If you are connected to GitHub, then it'll show you all your different projects, Noodle or otherwise, but you can clone the ones obviously that are Noodle projects. And it shows you which ones are Noodle projects because it detects the JSON file in the repo. Templates, there's nothing there yet, but I'm hoping we can get enough people to come back to Noodle or NodeGX to be able to start making some new templates, making some project templates, which will be way easier since we can do it with Claude Code. So we can make some really complex and beautiful templates just in a couple of hours just by working with Claude Code through an app, creating an app with NodeGX. So we're going to create a new project. We're going to quick start. We can also do it with AI, but I'm not going to show that at the moment because it's slow. But we'll get a video soon where we show a project being created with the internal AI of NodeGX Noodle. Not this way where we quick start. It would be either you quick start and you want to build the project by yourself like before, or you quick start, you point Claude Code to the folder that you've just created, and then do the MCP connection and tell Claude Code to start building what you want to build. So we'll just do tutorial projects, choose our location as usual. Create project. And we're back into the editor as usual with our classic Hello World homepage. So the left menu has just been updated visually. You'll also see that you have new icons at the top. That's to expand or contract the left menu if you want to, collapse the left menu if you don't want to see it, or pop it out as well if you have a need for that, if you want to move it around and not just have it stuck to the left all the time. In terms of creating components, it's the usual stuff, except we have a new Cloud Functions folder. So you have your usual visual logic components, but you also have a special sheet up here, which is a default one called Cloud Functions. And that's if you want to use the new NodeGX inbuilt backend that replaces the Noodle Cloud Services backend. So we have a new backend that's built on SQLite, and it's built from the ground up. So there's nothing from the old Noodle Cloud Services, which was very old, out of date, and a little bit buggy. But we'll come to that another time. Usual search stuff. We have the AI building panel, which is definitely an alpha and not to be judged too much on its appearance, but it allows you to build either visual and logic components inside this component or at the project level. So you can ask it that you want like several pages at one time that are all connected together. Or you can ask it to write documentation, which is cool. So once you've got your project to a certain point and you want to have it documented, a README file, an architecture file, etc., then you can get it, you can talk to the AI about writing documentation that gets stored in your project folder and pushed to GitHub. So then it's not just a blank Noodle project, but it actually has documentation about how the project is built, which makes it way easier for someone to collaborate with you, and would also make it easier when you do code export, which is something that's coming in the next few weeks, is extracting your Noodle project to React, with 99% pure React, well organized and documented, and especially if there's documentation created, that makes it even easier to export and just continue your project in React, or give it to a React developer to do for you, or give it to Claude Code in React if you decide that Noodle is not the place for you, or if you get to the point with your prototype where you decide Noodle has hit a wall for me, I need to start developing more complex stuff, export it to code and just get Claude Code to write the more complex stuff in React, carry on your project in React, and forget about the visual node editor. Which is a bit sad, but we'll see if we can do something about that one day. Your documentation lives here. Your version control is the same, except now you also have issues and pull requests. So if you're working with a team, then having issues and pull requests in here is a really handy way to target specific things that are going wrong in the app, or work on your own branch and then ask to pull into a different branch or into the main branch for whoever controls the GitHub repo on your team. Okay, the very cool part is the integrated backend. So let's just go straight there. So you can create a new backend. The built-in one comes with the Cloud Functions I mentioned earlier. If you want, though, of course, you can connect a parse server, Directus, Superbase, Pocketbase, or try your own custom endpoints. This is still in alpha, but in theory, what this does is it adapts the data nodes. The create record, update record nodes are adapted to each backend. So you'll have some for parse server. You'll have the same create record node for parse server as you would have for Superbase. So whichever backend you choose, those nodes adapt to whatever backend you've chosen. So, but let's do the built-in one because that's the most fun part. So let's say we're using this one already. We've got a data explorer, so we don't have any records in here. I'll get one that has records. That's a bit sad. This one. Not yet. Surely this one has something. Yes. There. So it's just a standard data explorer. You have your access control rules if you want to set access control for records, and you can add, delete records, export them, etc. You also have your schema, which you can update with new fields, and you have your access control here, where we can define who can access, what roles can access what tables, and can they get, create, etc. So basic for the moment, but I think it's going to be a nice way to have a backend that's already running on your machine. So you don't need to install Superbase and go through that whole mess of trying to set it up locally. You don't need to pay for a cloud version or get the free cloud version. You can just have something immediately up and running on your computer without having to face the future of paying somebody for hosting your backend. Then when you deploy the project, the front end and back end get deployed in the same place. So if you hook it up, for example, to Hetzner, Hostinger, Droplet in DigitalOcean, then it's a virtual machine where NodeGX will publish both the front end and the back end to the virtual machine. So also facilitates deployment, updates, debugging, execution histories, all that kind of stuff. It also has triggers, so you can set up triggers. For example, a cron job that runs every 3 hours that checks if whatever. You can hook it up to a cloud function or a workflow, which we'll talk about another time, 2 different things. Say this one, for example, and you'll have an execution history to show every time that fires. Or you can also just do it as a webhook. So you could have a webhook address. If you create that, it'll run a cloud function when a webhook is triggered from the outside. So you could have something even outside, like Stripe, for example, could send payment success into your backend and trigger an order complete cloud function that you've added. Or database changes. So if you see a field in your database that's changed, updated, or deleted, then that will trigger a certain function as well, which was available in theory in the original Noodle cloud service because it was parse server, but we didn't have all of the triggers in there. So that's that. You can also hook up OAuth providers, and you can hook up your own SMTP email. So from the back end, it can send password reset emails, and people will be able to sign in using any OAuth provider. This is untested and definitely an alpha, so I would doubt that this works out of the box, but it'll work, I hope, soon. Execution history shows anything that's happened in your cloud functions and what trigger data came in, what happened, what came out. So you can see all the different steps here, receive order, what went in, what went out. So you get really good detail on that. And then if you want to work on that, you can also pin it and it'll show you your cloud function, which is with, I think, the same, oh no, this is a workflow, sorry. So this is different nodes you wouldn't have seen before, but we'll talk about this in detail another time. But a workflow is essentially a pure JSON flow that's going to run on Node on the server without it being used in Cloud Functions. Cloud Functions works differently. It has a lot more, it's more like a kind of containerized environment for running code, whereas the workflows are really pure backend database actions. So they can run Cloud Functions. They can be called externally. So they're useful for things like dealing with webhooks coming in from Stripe and then running some sort of containerized code so that the idea is to separate what is kind of dangerous code, it gives you just access to running anything you want, and a safe part where there's no way that you could get into a workflow and do any damage. So it helps to kind of containerize and to ring fence the functions that you're running through workflows. So it makes everything a bit safer. So yeah, pinning the data, and then you can see each step that happened, when it happened, and what went in and what went out. So it's a really handy way to debug your workflows. Otherwise, what was the other thing I wanted to talk about with backends? Nothing there. That's it, I think, for now. The workflows, as I said, is something different. So you've seen workflows here. And provenance is something that's definitely an alpha, but an interesting idea. So provenance is if I have a page and I, on my page, have a button and the button shows a toast. Oh, no, there's no toasts, sorry. The button flips a switch and that switch shows another text. Sorry, I was rushing through that, but actually, yeah, the node editor has changed to the node picker. So the node picker is now easier to navigate. It has new documentation on each node. So all the old documentation is gone, and I'll be redoing screenshots and videos on each node. But for now, it's just basic documentation text on each node, and also the ports, some of the key ports that you have that just gives you an idea of what's available on that node. Just while we're here, the importer has been updated as well. So if you want to import stuff from another project, you now have a search bar and a much easier interface for importing, where it shows you the blast radius of what you're importing. So what's going to be new. It can also show you what things are conflicting, what styles are going to be added. So you get a much nicer user experience for imports. And so the node picker I said has, yeah, and the documentation has changed as well, but I'll show that another time. It is being completely redone. Other thing, so we had our text here, and this text is going to be hidden. And let's say it's a string that gives its value. So the string, which is, let's say that the string is going to be attached to a variable. So I'm going a bit crazy here, but you'll see why. Say the variable is going to be new text. And new text we're going to set to this string, which is okay. And let's say this string on another page, for example, in a different, I'm just doing it really simply here, the value is going to be set to the text. So this string, imagine we're on a different page and I'm referencing the string and the variable somewhere else. I can now click on the expression symbol next to the value of the string, and I can type in any Noodle expression. I can also open the expression editor where it shows you what you have on offer. But I know that I can type, for example, for that variable, I can have noodle.variables dot, and it was called, oh, I shouldn't have it. I shouldn't have a space in there, sorry. Let's call it variable 1. So noodle.variables.var1, and that will reference that variable as the value that goes in here. So let me refresh the page. Yeah, so new texts. So rather than the default one I set, it's now being set via the variables. So that means you can type in expressions directly into a field rather than having to connect a string to it every time or a variable to it every time. So we said we want to see what happens if the button flips the switch, and the switch determines if the text is mounted or not. So at the moment it's off, it's not mounted. If I click it, it mounts. If I click it, it unmounts. That's cool. I can also customize the labels on nodes. So if I right click a connector, if I right click the connector and add label, I can add a custom label to the connector. And that stays visible. And so we were going to get to provenance. I was going to get there eventually. I swear. This is all, I haven't forgotten. I'm getting there. Provenance is if I want in some complex workflow to try to figure out where the data is getting stuck or where some signal is not firing to try to debug, then I can click this record button at the bottom here. When I fire, let's just make this up a bit. When I fire the signal, you'll see that the recorder records the events that are going on. And you can do multiple ones. I can click multiple times. And then if I stop, it'll ask me to see what happened. It'll take me into provenance. And so it'll show me that during that recording session, I had 2 button clicks. The first button click triggered a switch, which led to a node being hidden. So the text was then hidden because of the switch being clicked. So it gives you this kind of human readable output of what happened. So obviously with a complex workflow, you're going to have multiple steps that are all triggering each other and seeing what is triggering what. This is also very, very beta alpha at the moment, but I think it's going to give us way more visibility over what's happening across multiple components because it's not confined to just one component, but it will be able to watch events happening over multiple components and showing you where they go in, where they come out, and eventually figuring out what went wrong. There's also another experimental feature, which is, say, this text is empty for some reason. I don't know why it is. And I've typed in my text and my variable, but the text that shows up here is not new text, it's something else. I can right click the node and ask a question, why is the text empty? And it should show me the provenance of that text. So it'll show me the string node where it came from, and I'll be able to figure out why that is empty. Or I can go back to that and also try to work out why the variable is not working. Otherwise, you also have a new tab in the properties panel, which is ports. And this not only is just to educate about what ports the nodes have, which also you get from the new port explainer. It comes up every time you hover a port, but also to show you when something is connected, like the mounted signal, mounted input. it shows you which port it's actually connected to, and you can click on it to go and have a look at that one. And so you can also follow back all the different connections, see all the different possible ports and which ones are currently being connected to. And I'm sure we'll be improving that in the future as well. So a lot more on traceability. Traceability has been a really big focus for me in this project. In the settings, you've got the usual stuff, but also new stuff. So you can add PWA, progressive web app, name, display, icon, etc. So then you can ask your users to install the app on their home screen, on their phone, and that'll come up looking like an app. You have custom variables, which means you can add a global variable. There's a new type that exists in Noodle for global variables. So rather than putting all like a whole bunch of variables on the app home, the main app component, you can just define them in here rather than having them floating around as nodes on the app, which is messy. So they can be anything from objects, strings, arrays, whatever. There's a new editor for objects and arrays. So it's a JSON editor. So you have easy and advanced mode. Advanced is just the usual. You just put in your own JSON. Easy mode is you add everything visually. So let's say we'll add an object to the array, and the object will have a text, and the text will be, and then when we look, that's what it comes out to in the advanced. So it's a way to visually understand how JSON is constructed for people who don't know that yet. Then also libraries, you can add your own custom libraries, which is something people were asking for a long time. So rather than putting it in the head code of the app, you can have it actually imported here and it will manage the import for you. What else? The runtime has been updated to React 19 from React 18. So that just opens the way in the future for us making more changes that are only available in React 19. And then the editor settings, you can go into light mode, which is quite nice. Actually, one of the only apps I've ever used that I actually prefer the light mode for some reason. I'll stick a dark mode for now. Always show wire labels, turns all the wire labels on. And then you've got your API connector. So this is global to the whole editor, the whole editor. So if you set here the provider and the API key, every project you create will share that same API key. Just worth mentioning. And you can set it up with any connection you want. So it can be any it could be Olama, it can be whatever you want. I think I haven't added a OpenAI compatible endpoint. So it would be anything like Grok or whatever you want would be able to be connected from here. And then this is the MCP part. So this is where you would take the command for your MCP server when you've opened a project, give it to Cloud Code, say, hey, Cloud, can you create me a page that is a landing page with this and this element? And Cloud Code will be able to design all the nodes for you. And if you've activated a backend or not, Claude will be able to create a backend for your project with the built-in backend or one of the other ones, and be able to also set up cloud functions, workflows. So Claude Code and the AI that's in the editor as well, it's able to work through the full stack. So you can create things in the database. It can set up dummy data in the database. It can do anything. It can really set up everything for you, which is great. And then there's a second MCP server, which is the Observe. So this is a useful one to set up at the same time in the same project. You have one MCP server that is to create and to understand what the nodes and to create things. You have another MCP server that, when connected, will inform Claude, or Claude will have access to the log of what happened recently in your editor. So if you've been clicking through things, adding things, testing things, then Claude can see the output of what you've been doing. And so if you say, oh, I've just added a node and it's not, the repeater is empty, I don't know why, it can have a look at the nodes you've added, it can have a look at the connectors and the data and say, well, the array that you've added doesn't have any data yet. Do you want me to set up a static array and fill it with dummy data? So it gives you that possibility to have Claude be conscious of what's actually happening on the screen in your app, which is really, really handy. And I think that is the tour. Deployment is coming soon. I'm going to be looking into server-side rendering and SSG, static pre-rendering, which I haven't even tried yet. I didn't even know it existed. But I know server-side rendering is something that people were really, really asking for. So we're going to be experimenting with that soon. We're going to be looking at self-hosting on your own computer as well. So if you're running a local app, then you can run Docker and just have it running on your computer without having the editor open, and just manage it on your local host. We're going to be looking at connecting with any provider that does API key setup. So Hetzner, for example, as a host, they provide virtual machines and an API key per project. So you can set up a project, give Claude the API key. It'll set up the virtual machine that's right for your project. It'll be something at €3 a month or less. And it'll be able to create an SSH key on your computer to be able to push the project into Hetzner, into the virtual machine, check that it's running, debug anything that's wrong, and essentially get your project on the internet with you doing the domain name and the DNS stuff. But it'll give you all the details that you need to be able to run your project on a web hosted server. So for like $3 a month, rather than worrying about AWS and all that crap we had to do before, it'll just push everything into a container on the server and run everything from the server, and give you access, if you have the built-in backend, to an admin dashboard where you can go and see execution histories and the data tables and all that stuff, and be able to look at the live data if you want to. There'll be a separation between the live data, obviously, and what's on your editor. So that's coming. And then, of course, exporting to code. We're going to be exporting to React 19. And that's something that has not started yet. The development is scoped and seems to be reasonably easy, and actually seems to be able to export code that is very readable. One last point I would make is this one. The Noodle JSON has been changed completely. So you might have trouble migrating an old Noodle project into NodeGX. So I want to be able to try to support that as much as possible. If you do have an old project, you want to bring it over to NodeGX, get in touch, and we'll try to do it together. I have no problem with that. The new project JSON is very, very small. So this is all you've got for your project JSON at the moment. All the basically high level parameters. The components now live in their own folders. So I have an app component, I have a home component. The home component gives me details about the component itself, which is very, very short. It gives me the connectors that it has, and it gives me the nodes that are in the component. So this separation is really, really important, and it's cleaned up the JSON language and separated it out. It's really important because it means that when you're giving your project over to Claude Code or another AI, even an AI that's not like an open source AI, or one running locally on your computer, it has the possibility of being able to edit this, because the old project JSON was a huge file. This one, it's able to look at the file tree and target one specific component to be able to make very surgical edits and not have hundreds or thousands of lines of context that it has to deal with. So this worked a long while on this system, and this was the system that came out as the most AI coding friendly, but also the most human coder friendly. If anyone ever wanted to understand your project and didn't really know what NodeGX was, there's a whole Node library that explains how the JSON works. Everything has been documented, so it's completely demystified the Noodle JSON and turned it into something that anybody could learn if they were coding with this, or they wanted to debug something. But in particular, it's AI who would be able to debug this. So that's been a huge change to the system. We're going to redo all the prefabs. At the moment, the prefabs are out of date because of all the node changes we did. We're going to reload the modules, but also create some new ones. And I think that is all I wanted to say. You'll find a whole bunch of new nodes that you didn't see before. You'll see the component stack has been, tons and tons of nodes have been fixed. I'm not going to go through them all, but there's some really annoying bugs like component stacks and page navigation that have been fixed. Pop-up closing that didn't work before that now works really well. States that never outputted empty values that now you can choose what kind of empty value they output, etc. You got some crypto stuff I think we didn't have before that's useful for that's useful for certain projects. Some more date things that we didn't have before. What else? Component utilities. The repeater item works now, which it didn't before. Run tasks has been overhauled, so you can decide what signals go into run tasks and define them rather than having to change your JSON every time you want to run multiple tasks or looping tasks. The objects and everything have new outputs. There's outputs for when the object gets created or when it's just done nothing, but the signal got called, and so it outputs something anyway. You'll see, you'll have to try them all out to see what they do. You have CSV parsers. You have a logic node that does Blockly. So where was that one? It's pretty. So for anybody who doesn't like the Noodle logic and they actually are really used to Blockly, you can go into Blockly editor and do your inputs and outputs and get objects and do everything you can do with Noodle. You can do in here with Blockly. It's the same language, and it comes out. It defines it at the end, and you'll see what the code is at the end, which will be compatible Noodle code that comes out at the end. So essentially generating the same JavaScript you would do if you just had a function node, but doing it through Blockly instead. And I think those are the main ones. And yeah, there's a couple of things like actions, which are more for, I think, the LLM. So anyone who wants to build things with LLMs, there's stream buffers, text accumulators, so stuff that's really useful for taking data that's streaming in from a cloud function using server-side events. You can have that instead of a WebSocket, you can have that streaming server-side events to the front end and sending the little chunks of AI text if you're building an AI chat service, for example. So also something to play with. A lot of stuff to play with. The REST node has been replaced with an HTTP node, so a bit more visual rather than having to write the stuff yourself. And this, again, we need to do a lot more work on this. There's very basic authentication that's in there and response mapping, but we'll definitely work more on that to improve the HTTP node. But I think you get the idea. I think we're good, and I think that was a long tour. And thanks for sticking around till the very, very end. I really need people to get in and test it, so please let me know how you find it. Let me know if you think this is something you could use and for what kinds of projects you could use it, so we start to understand what NodeGX is useful for in the world. It's not going to be for every app in the world, but I definitely feel like there's use for it in education. There's probably use for it in building internal tools, maybe building IoT. I don't know, but I would really love to find out. I'm going to be building some of my own stuff with NodeGX and trying to figure out what I want to use it for. But I'm really personally happy that the Noodle dream, the dream of the Noodle team is still alive, and I really appreciate all the work they did. And I'm just really happy that we're at the point with Claude Code and Fable that I was able to get this code base into ship and to update all the dependencies and to make it super secure, super modern, and revive the Noodle dream. So let's see what happens in the next phases, and I really hope that you give as much feedback as you can, and I really look forward to seeing you in the community and getting everybody talking again. So hope to see you all soon. Thanks.